Amazing Spider-Man number 238, The Shadow of Evil's Past. In the heart of Manhattan, Peter Parker stands witness as his Aunt May and her friend, Nathan Lubensky, sign a ream of insurance papers, allowing her to officially operate her own boarding house for senior citizens. Peter wonders to himself what her tenants would say if they knew they were living in the house where Spider-Man came of age. Staring out into the street, Peter's thoughts drift back to the days when he was being raised by both his aunt and his Uncle Ben. But Ben was killed when Spider-Man failed to stop a burglar, the criminal who later would rob Ben Parker of his life. He consoles himself with thoughts of his aunt's newfound romance with Nathan.
Right after I got my powers, I figured I could earn some quick bucks wrestling. I made the costume so nobody'd recognize me. Hey! Help! Grab him! Don't let him get away! Hey, sorry, pal. I'm a wrestler, not a cop. I figured, why should I get involved? The police were at Aunt May's. Someone had broken in.
Bad news for you, son.
My Uncle Ben tried to stop him, but the guy was armed. The cop told me the one who did it to a warehouse, and whoever it was, I wanted him first. And I got him, too. It was the crook from the arena. The one I should have stopped, but I didn't. I had the power and I didn't use it. I lost my uncle because I ignored my responsibilities. He always used to tell me, with great power comes great responsibility.
Outside the office, Peter and his companions make their way to celebrate at a local restaurant. But their joy is short-lived as Peter's spider sense goes into overdrive. A speeding car bursts out of an alleyway. Only Peter's astonishing reflexes saves the lives of his loved ones. Angered, Peter rushes off. Spider sense going crazy. Seconds later, the masked figure of Spider-Man appears on a nearby rooftop, and the costumed crime fighter web swings into action. Leaping onto the top of one of the police cars in hot pursuit, Spider-Man closes in on the crooks, his automatic camera now webbed in place. With a mighty jump born of spider strength, the web-slinger lands atop the car of his prey. A half a second later, he slips in an open window, delivering a powerful kick to the driver. As the car barrels onto a side street, Spider-Man grabs the wheel and pulls hard, swerving to avoid endangering pedestrians. One of the burglars is flung from the car and manages to escape Spider-Man.
Hey!
Spider-Man emerges from the now wrecked car, taking off after the fleeing burglar. He chases the frightened felon through a veritable maze of abandoned factories and warehouses, finally trapping him on a bricked-over loading dock. But the cornered thug doesn't know when to quit, so he hurls a smoke bomb towards our hero. Although ineffectual, the distraction provides cover for the thug's escape. Spider-Man spies an open manhole and pokes his head inside the dank tunnel. Using his spider signal, the wall crawler is dejected to see the labyrinth of tunnels, any one of which the criminal could have used to effect his escape. Consoling himself with the collar of the other three thieves, confident that the police can catch this other thug, Spidey goes topside to debrief the cops. Meanwhile, the escaped thug breathes a sigh of relief as he discovers a hidden door.
What a slimy mess. Why can't I be one of those galaxy-hopping superheroes? Why do I end up in the sewers? Ugh. You don't find the Fantastic Four in a sewer, or the Avengers. Never have I seen the Avengers in a sewer, or the Defenders. Well, maybe the Hulk.
Spider-Man grabs his camera from the squad car's roof, and as he leaves, he fails to notice where this heady chase had led them all, to one of Norman Osborn's abandoned plants. At that moment, deep underground, our friend the thug discovers to his surprise that he has stumbled into the secret lair of the Green Goblin. Elsewhere in Manhattan, Peter Parker rests in his apartment, phoning his Aunt May, developing his photos and changing into his street clothes. A brief while later, Peter drops off his photos to city editor Joe Robertson, who is amazed by the photos. Robertson calls for a copy boy, Peter learns that the car chase ended at the old Osborn warehouse. Suddenly, Peter is consumed by his memories of Norman Osborn, how he was actually the Green Goblin, how he had learned Spider-Man's secret identity, and how Osborn perished by his own hand, but not before he caused the death of Peter's first love, Gwen Stacy. The skies of New York City seem peaceful, until the calm is shattered by the rocket-powered sounds of the ghoulish Green Goblin's jet glider. Fuming, the Goblin's only thoughts center around revenge. Revenge against the amazing wall crawler, Spider-Man. The Goblin jets off into the sky, evil pervading his very being. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Spider-Man swings to his doctor? Changing into Peter Parker, he enters Dr. Bromwell's office to check on his heavy head cold. Doc Bromwell confirms that Peter indeed has a whopper of a cold, but he has far worse news for the intrepid adventurer. His beloved Aunt May, having recently undergone major surgery, must receive no sudden shocks, no excitement. A dejected Peter leaves the office, realizing that now, more than ever, she must never learn his secret identity.
Doctor, how is she?
It's a form of seizure. The mind retreating into itself under extreme stress. All we can do is give her time.
Why do the people I care about always get hurt when I'm just trying to do the right thing? It happens whether I'm Spider-Man or Peter. Just can't seem to win. First Uncle Ben, now this? How can I live with myself?
Dr. Forrest, dial 118, please. Dr. Forrest, please dial 118.
On his way towards class, Peter is immersed in his worries over Aunt May, so immersed that he fails to notice his classmates, especially Harry Osborn, whose father, Norman, drops his son off with a few curt, angry words. Harry wonders to himself what could be so troubling to his father. In class, Harry tells Peter of his father's strange behavior. But as soon as class is over, Peter does a quick change, and the ever-vigilant Spider-Man is on patrol once more. Soon, he happens upon a daring rooftop robbery. Before the outclassed thugs can react, Spider-Man is upon them like a red and blue blur. As the web-slinger dishes out the punishment to these run-of-the-mill crooks, he silently wishes that his horrible head cold would fade into a distant memory. As a crowd of bystanders looks on, Spider-Man continues his amazing acrobatic assault. Even though he barely taxes himself, he begins to get a funny feeling about these crooks. It seems almost as if they've been practicing for just such a fight. The fight rages on, and Spider-Man draws the fight away from the building's elevator so the crowd can take their leave. While he continues dispensing quips and webbing, he notices that the crooks don't even seem to mind that they've lost their hostages. Something is definitely up. Spider-Man struggles to put a quick end to the skirmish when he overhears one of the criminals mention a sinister gimmick. Before he can react, a grenade releases a strange, odorless vapor in the wall crawler's face. High above, the Green Goblin gloats as his plan unravels. The robbery was a ruse to dose Spidey with a gas to weaken his spider sense.
Well, if it isn't a meeting of the Diamond Lovers of America, it's Spider-Man! What? Spider-Man? Where? Oh, I just get so flustered when I meet a celebrity. I just don't know what to say.
How about you just say goodbye?
I'm way ahead of you.
Stay still, will you?
Actually, no.
Get him! It's 3 against 1.
As far as I'm concerned, that means you're outnumbered. Good thing I remembered to set this up ahead of time. I hate to use so much expensive webbing on yo-yo.
The hired goons are shocked to find the Goblin's weapon hasn't finished Spidey off, and the wall crawler makes short work of his foes. A quick snapshot for the Daily Bugle, and Spider-Man web swings away with thoughts of the strange burglary filling his head. Grabbing his clothes from a nearby alley, Spider-Man quickly changes into his Peter Parker identity, all the while wondering what possible effect the strange vapor from the grenade could have on him. Unbeknownst to Spidey, the Green Goblin observes him from the sky. He can't believe that his arch-nemesis is really a 19-year-old kid. Peter makes his way to the Daily Bugle, nagged by the feeling that his spider sense is trying to warn him of something, but it can't. Of course, it's trying desperately to tell him that the Green Goblin is close by, trying to learn the amazing wall crawler's real name. Inside the bustling offices of the Bugle, reporter Ned Leeds confronts Peter about his feelings for J. Jonah Jameson's former secretary, Betty Brant. Peter tells Ned that he has moved on, but their conversation is interrupted by the bluster of Jameson himself. A quick transaction of photos for cash takes place, or rather, Jameson tries to welch out of paying.
Peter, these photos are terrific. In all my years as editor, I've never known a photographer as resourceful as you.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Robertson.
I don't know how you get these shots.
Me neither. You're always just the right place at just the right time. Tell me, Parker, what's your secret?
A good telephoto lens and a lot of luck, I guess.
That's so. Sure there isn't something else that you want to tell us?
Well, I'd like to get my paycheck, if you don't mind.
Parker, you really tick me off. I'll find out how a young squirt like you gets those photos. Or later.
Better make it later. Bye.
Peter threatens to take his photos to a rival newspaper, leaving Jonah little choice but to pay. As Peter leaves, the Goblin hovers outside. Thanks to a handy listening device, he now knows that Spider-Man is really Peter Parker. The young man is stunned by the revelation that his arch foe has learned his secret identity. But he also knows that to fight the Goblin here may cause his aunt a fatal shock. As he tries to react, the Goblin taunts his prey, choking Parker with a thick plume of black smoke from his Goblin glider. While the battle rages on, inside the quaint home, Aunt May grows concerned over the dense fog that has gathered, and she wonders how her frail nephew will find his way home. If only she could see outside. The Goblin uses his sparkle gloves to try and fry the youth, but Peter's spider reflexes keep him from harm. Peter readies himself for yet another of the ghastly Goblin's tricks. This time, an explosive bat missile is hurled Parker's way, but again, his reflexes save him. In a last-ditch effort, Peter lunges at the gloating Green Goblin with all his strength and speed. Too little, too late. A sparkle blast has Peter on the ropes, and a strange weapon shaped like a ghost chokes off the oxygen from the youth's lungs. He collapses, but instead of being completely unconscious, he's merely stunned. The amazed Goblin binds the youth with steel cable, then speeds off to his waterfront hideout. Once inside, Peter revives to discover himself bound tightly, with the evil Goblin tinkering with menacing-looking chemicals. Peter tries to delay his fate by playing against the Goblin's ego to great effect. As the Goblin reasons, since Parker won't leave the warehouse alive, he will show his true face to the defeated wall crawler, the face of Norman Osborn. Meanwhile, not far from Forest Hills, Queens, the thug that escaped Spider-Man shows a mysterious stranger the Green Goblin's lair. Notes, private journals, all the Goblin's equipment lies untouched. As the stranger begins to load the contents into an awaiting van, Peter and Joe Robertson make the short drive to his aunt's house, also in Forest Hills. In the middle of conversation, Robertson's police radio picks up an urgent call. There's a fire at an Osborn plant, the same one that Spider-Man was at earlier that day. The intrepid duo race to the scene in minutes, only to find the fire mostly put out. Photographer Lance Bannon has beaten Parker to the punch with a roll of exclusive pictures.
And Roger, sir, can I have your next position after 170 East?
Robertson questions the fire chief, who suggests that the fire might have been caused by arson. He also adds that the room that caught fire wasn't on any floor plan. Peter ducks into the building, anxiety building within him. Though the chamber is burnt beyond belief, he recognizes it as one of the Goblins' hideouts. Leaving the building, Peter begins to wonder who might have looted the Goblins' equipment. But he has little time to ponder this thought as his Aunt May calls over Robertson's mobile phone. As Peter takes off for his aunt's home, he thinks about the recent events and how he may actually be responsible for unleashing a new Green Goblin. Later that evening, in the South Bronx, the mysterious stranger instructs his hired thug to dump the van they used in the theft. The thug tells his boss not to worry, there won't be a clue left. And with a quick press of a handheld detonator, the van and its driver explode into a shower of fiery fragments, leaving no clues as to the crime committed earlier. The following morning in Lower Manhattan, the same mysterious figure enters a derelict building where we find the stolen Goblin equipment. The stranger pores over the Goblin's arsenal, the explosive fury of the pumpkin bombs, the lethal touch of the high-voltage sparkle blaster, and the awesome might of the Goblin's powerful jet glider. The stranger maneuvers swiftly and easily atop the glider in the confined space, realizing that Osborn could have made far more money by marketing such a device than he ever could have made in crime. But the power, the freedom! He sees why Osborn kept it to himself. Stopping the glider, the stranger turns his attention to an altered Goblin mask. Turning to a nearby table, the stranger dons a modified Goblin suit and begins to understand Osborn's true obsession. The compulsion to escape society's restraints overtook Osborn. However, the stranger vows he will control the compulsion. The Green Goblin is no more, he announces. Amazing Spider-Man number 40, The End of the Green Goblin. Take a look at my face, Parker, rants Norman Osborn. A good long look. It's the last face you'll ever see in this life. Osborn has revealed himself to be the criminal genius, the Green Goblin, while a helpless Peter Parker now struggles to buy time to save his very life. He mentions his college classmate, Osborn's son, Harry. Osborn seems to withdraw into his own world at the mention of his son, but the specter of his hated foe Spider-Man snaps him back. Peter hammers at the obviously unstable Osborn by repeatedly dropping Harry's name. Osborn begins to tell Parker why he first became the Green Goblin. As Peter struggles with his bonds, Osborn tells his story. He was a successful businessman whose wife passed away when his only son was a mere infant. His work prevented him from spending much time with Harry, so he tried to buy his son's love. Osborn then tells Peter about his ruthlessness in business and how he had his partner arrested for embezzling so he could steal his inventions. The pieces still don't form a puzzle in Peter's mind, however, and he goads Osborn into revealing more. One night, Osborn stumbled upon a series of his partner's strange chemical formulas. Shooing his son away, Osborn locked himself in his lab, working with one of the formulas till it turned a suspicious green color. Seconds later, Osborn's world exploded before him. The solution was highly unstable. Rushed to the hospital, he lay for weeks convalescing. The explosion had caused serious brain trauma within Osborn, hatching his many psychoses. He became bent on using his genius for crime and designed a bizarre costume. At last, the Green Goblin was born, and his primary target became Spider-Man. The Goblin believed the underworld would respect any man who could defeat the wall crawler. But with his origin told, Osborn puts his Goblin mask back on and prepares for the end. As the Goblin gloats, Parker thinks of his loved ones, Betty Brant, and especially Aunt May. Elsewhere at that moment, Aunt May confides to her neighbor Anna Watson that Peter Parker has been gone for far too long without calling. A quick phone call to the Daily Bugle informs the worried May that her nephew hasn't showed up there either. Meanwhile, we find Betty Brant in a train station in Chicago as she prepares to return to New York City. She wonders if she will get her job at the Bugle back, and if there will still be a place for her in Peter Parker's life. Lost in thought, the image of Spider-Man keeps reappearing in her brain, filling her with uncertainty and dread. While Betty Brant boards her train, Peter continues his valiant effort to free himself from the Goblin's clutches. Enraged when Parker tells him that he beat Osborn every time they clashed, the Goblin uses his retroscope device to project mental images of their past battles. Their first encounter, when the Goblin teamed with the Enforcers, is recalled. The retroscope images change from the Enforcers' battle to the pair's next battle royale. Then, the Fantastic Four's Human Torch helped Spidey defeat the Goblin. But that's not how the Goblin sees it. Peter taunts Osborn, calling him a coward, as the enraged supervillain conjures up images of yet another battle. Finally, the retroscope shifts to their most recent battle, when a criminal rival of Osborn's, the Crime Master, intervened and inadvertently saved Spider-Man. As his foe continues ranting, Peter frees one hand from his steel bonds, but the crafty Goblin sees this and frees the captive youth for their final fight. Quickly donning his Spider-Man costume, Parker turns to engage the enemy. Before he can make another move, the Goblin hurls a barrage of exploding pumpkin bombs. Our quick-thinking hero creates a web net, sending the Goblin's own weapons back at him. Alas, the pumpkin bombs are destroyed by the Goblin's sparkle blasts. Then, using the explosion as cover, Osborn makes his way to his Goblin glider. Encircling his prey, the Goblin laughs at the now groggy Spider-Man. Closer and closer he comes, until the web-slinger connects with a well-timed right cross. The Goblin is knocked off his glider. Another explosion as the infamous Goblin glider crashes. The Goblin appears dazed. Spider-Man wonders to himself if his foe is truly beaten, and if so, what will he do to him? Osborn knows his secret identity. Before he can ponder any further, the Goblin resumes his attack, striking Spider-Man with a live wire. Merely stunned, Spider-Man dodges a barrage of sparkle blasts as he closes in. Uprooting the very chair that had held him captive, Spider-Man hurls the heavy steel mass at his enemy. But you can't keep a wretched supervillain down. The Goblin showers Spidey with a handful of electronic bats that swarm around his head. The Goblin uses this cover to reach his ultimate weapon, the fully automated Goblin Cannon. The smell of burning ozone fills the air, and with a crackle of energy, the Goblin Cannon fires at Spider-Man. Only his astounding speed saves him from the blast, speed which Spider-Man uses to knock the Goblin to his knees. But the Goblin stumbles, and before Spider-Man can grab him, the Goblin takes the full brunt of the cannon's electrochemical blast. Fire blazes through Osborn's lair as the Goblin lies on the ground, immobile. Could he be dead? Spider-Man rushes to him to discover he is indeed alive and only wants to know where his son Harry could be. He has lost all knowledge of his criminal double life and of Spider-Man's secret identity. As the fire department struggles to get inside, Spider-Man quickly removes the Goblin's costume. Just as the firemen break through, Spider-Man tosses the Goblin costume into the all-consuming flames. The hero brings the dazed Osborn over to the authorities, never revealing his true identity. As the police bombard him with questions, the web-slinger swings away, his thoughts filled with worry over his Aunt May.
I've never liked Osborn that much, but for Harry's sake, I'm glad he's okay.
Oh. Now, how did that...
Once again, at his aunt's home, Spider-Man is shocked to see Dr. Bromwell's car parked outside. One quick change later, and Peter bursts through the front door, his aunt resting calmly in her den. Dr. Bromwell then accuses Peter of only thinking of himself, giving his aunt such a shock. The doctor leaves, and Peter keeps a close watch on his frail aunt. When she awakens, Peter tells her he was out studying late and lost track of time. Meanwhile, at a hospital on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, Norman and Harry Osborn are reunited as they discuss the bright future ahead.
The worse for wear, but the important thing is, it's mine now. All mine,
In his place now stands the Hobgoblin. And with these words, the mysterious stranger reveals an even more terrifying visage than the Green Goblins, an image of horror and fear. A new and lethal adversary of Spider-Man is born. Back in Greenwich Village, Spider-Man makes his way to his apartment, mulling over the awful day. The Hobgoblin's on the loose, and he may know the secret that could ruin his life forever. His secret identity. Things couldn't possibly get any worse. Or could they? Amazing Spider-Man number 239 now strikes the Hobgoblin. Midnight in New Jersey. A heavily armored van careens through a cement wall at an Osborn manufacturing plant. The evening calm shattered. There is no stopping this engine of destruction, only getting out of its way. One hour later, the authorities have arrived at the scene. A representative of Osborn Manufacturing, Mencken, informs the police that there have been a half-dozen thefts in recent weeks with nothing stolen, but empty storerooms were found that they didn't know they had. Harry Osborn arrives concerned. The next morning, across the Hudson River in Manhattan, a mysterious stranger buys a newspaper with the headline, "Mystery Break-In in Jersey." He chuckles at the thought that his robbery made front-page news. Soon he returns to Lower Manhattan and a derelict building which houses the heavily armored van and equipment of the Hobgoblin. The Hobgoblin enters the battle van he stole the previous day. From his readings of the Goblin's journals, he learned that Osborn planned to use it as a mobile headquarters. The Hobgoblin vows to pick up where the Green Goblin left off, including carrying on his vendetta against Spider-Man. Meanwhile, said superhero visits his sometime girlfriend, the Black Cat, in the hospital. An urgent radio report informs the wall crawler that there's been yet another break-in at an Osborn plant. Wishing he could stay with his injured girlfriend, but realizing his duty, Spider-Man spins a web line to a nearby building, intending to check out the facts of the robberies. Having grabbed a newspaper, the Amazing Spider-Man ducks into an easily opened skylight and into the apartment of his alter ego, Peter Parker. The newspaper article has given Peter the whole story of the Osborn break-ins, but it has also fueled an urgent sense of paranoia. Peter tends to his costume, which, after 48 hours of non-stop spider activity, has become ripe. While he carries on with his chores, he reflects on the Osborn break-ins and wonders if the thief now has Osborn's journals. If so, did Osborn include the fact that Peter Parker is Spider-Man? Peter vows to check out the few goblin hideouts he knows of, but after he gets some well-earned sleep. Considerably later, in fact, 10 hours later, Peter is awakened by a phone call from reporter Amy Powell. She invites him to dinner, but Peter realizes that he's overslept. He's got to get moving to those goblin hideouts. One quick sandwich and a swig of milk later, the Amazing Spider-Man is web-swinging his way to an abandoned warehouse off 23rd Street and 9th Avenue. Not one for the subtle approach tonight, Spidey smashes through a boarded-up window. He's too late, however. This store of goblin equipment has been raided. Spider-Man takes off like a shot for another store of Osborn equipment. Moments later, at the rear door of the Old Village Theater, Spider-Man discovers the stage door light on. As he draws nearer, his spider sense goes off the scale. Bursting through the door, he comes face to face with the Hobgoblin.
Huh? This doesn't look like the entrance to a criminal stronghold. This is a different story. Goes nothing.
The wall crawler makes a crack about the Hobgoblin's outfit, which the villain doesn't take very well, unleashing a series of sparkle blasts at Spider-Man. Realizing he's not ready to tackle Spider-Man yet, the Hobgoblin streaks off on his glider, with the web-slinger right on his tail.
You're pathetic! How did you ever get your reputation?
Must have been the tabloids.
This clown's outmaneuvering me every step of the way. How do I nail lunatic? Whoa! Territory. Why do I get myself into these things? Uh-oh.
Enjoying the...
Some flight! No Peanuts? No Stallone movie? I'm out of here! Now to make an easy spider landing.
As Spider-Man follows close behind, the Hobgoblin hurls a pumpkin bomb with venom. The bomb, packed with more explosives than the Goblin ever used, misses Spidey completely. Spidey retaliates with a load of debris that the Hobgoblin barely avoids. A swarm of razor-sharp bats is the next assault from the Hobgoblin, and it takes a dazzling array of acrobatic moves on Spider-Man's part to avoid their lethal touch. Springing back into action, the wall crawler confidently hurls himself at the Hobgoblin, but he overshoots the glider.
Let's get this over with!
I can't outmaneuver him.
Spider-Man? How'd you find me?
I followed the slime trail.
I'm going to enjoy shooting you down. Let's see what this baby can really do. Osborn says these are smart bombs.
How do I get him now? That's the mother of all flying wings.
Time for a little double team.
That whip mind of its own.
As Spider-Man web parachutes to the ground, the Hobgoblin hurls one of his patented gas ghosts at the wall crawler. Holding his breath, Spider-Man uses the smoke for cover while he employs his spider sense to draw a bead on the Hobgoblin. After a quick double tap on the trigger of his trusty web shooter, Spidey's web splats against the underbelly of the Hobgoblin's glider. With a powerful tug, Spider-Man reels in his foe, sending the Hobgoblin crashing to the pavement below. Defeat upon him, the Hobgoblin uses a flurry of sparkle blasts to effect his escape. The blasts cause a gas line beneath the street to rupture and explode. The fire begins to spread. The entire neighborhood is in danger of going up in flames. With only seconds to save countless lives, Spider-Man grabs a steel plate and uses it to dig through a ton of asphalt and gravel. Finding the main feeder line, he squeezes it shut with all his might. No gas, no fire. The danger is over. Scratch that, thinks Spider-Man. The fire is out, that's all. Hobgoblin got away. While the web-slinger fumes over the villain's escape, Hobgoblin fares little better. Vowing to humble Spider-Man like he's never been humbled before, the villain returns to his hidden warehouse. Back in Greenwich Village, Spider-Man makes his way to his apartment, mulling over the awful day. The Hobgoblin's on the loose, and he may know the secret that could ruin his life forever. His secret identity. Things couldn't possibly get any worse. Or could they? Then you really are serious?
Me? Hardly ever. But my old man is. For my sake, please say yes.
But how am I gonna afford it?
Well, all taken care of. Dear old Dad'll pay for...
Some deal.
Yeah, he's been spoiling me ever since he and my mother got divorced. He can buy a good father-son relationship like he can buy everything else.